rest of humanity wish them luck and Godspeed as well.
Hey FPS Games, back with another video, and today guys I'm doing a comparison of Quake 2, the legendary first person shooter for PC, and later it came out on console on the Nintendo 64, would you believe? Albeit not a direct port due to the expansive scope of the original PC version and the Nintendo 64 hardware limitation. However, this version does introduce dynamic lighting, something that's missing from the original game. Now, in order for me to do a clean comparison, I'm going to use the original PC version with no modifications and source ports, and I'm going to run it at a 4:3 aspect ratio. And then to note, on the Nintendo 64 side, I'm using the memory expansion to try and get the best image quality possible. I'm capturing this via S-Video, and also I'm switching the controller to style C because it's the easiest option and probably the closest one to the GoldenEye controls, if that makes sense. And let's get straight into this comparison. So let's first compare weapon modeling, weapon animation, and overall weapon design. So guys, as you can see so far, the animations are much smoother on the PC. Now this is, bear in mind, running at a steady 60 frames per second, and there is a limitation on the Nintendo 64 is that it runs with the target of 30 frames per second. And you can also see that the animations for the weapons themselves are halved in frame rate again, so I think they are actually at 15. So fundamentally, the weapon design is pretty much ported from the PC version, albeit with some limitations on both the animations, the frame rate of the animations, and there is some restrictions on certain weapons because of prevention of kickback. You don't want too much kickback with the controller that you're using, especially the Nintendo 64 controller. The analog isn't great, so it is noticeable that the Nintendo 64 development team obviously tried to compensate for that fact. To note, there's also some nice little additions on the Nintendo 64 version, like weapon flashing on the weapon, shotgun, machine gun, etc. That's missing in the PC version. And also I do prefer the explosions in the Nintendo 64. Okay, so next up, let's take a direct look at the level design. So in the Nintendo 64 version, they've actually revamped the design and layout of the entire game, but it does take segments from the PC version and kind of recompiles them to make them work for the Nintendo 64. What you will notice is there's a lot of environments, outdoor environments in particular, that are missing, but there is some certain ones present. But again, that's probably driven from the fact that it's limited. But they did try their best to try and bring some of those outdoor areas into the level aspects. Again, the whole structure has changed. So certain levels that you may see, let's just say the third level in the PC version, is absolutely no way the same as the third level in the Nintendo 64 version. There's only 19 levels in the Nintendo 64 version. I believe there's like 32 plus in the PC as well. So there's that also. To note, the N64 version as well is really directly linear in this case, because the original PC version actually had some hub elements to it, and what I mean is there was 4 or 5 levels within a hub, and you could travel between each level, and you could move back and forth between those levels to complete objectives, whereas now it's kind of compiled those into single levels, and there's still maybe 4 or 5 levels within the hub, but unfortunately you can't travel between those levels, if that makes sense. So as you can see here in this side-by-side comparisons and this particular segment, I actually prefer the Nintendo 64 lighting. So as I mentioned earlier, it actually uses dynamic lighting. I actually prefer the overall colour palette of the Nintendo 64 version. The PC version looks kind of really grey to me now, and I prefer the kind of different additions of blue and green, and in some cases it often feels like you're on a space station as opposed to an actual alien planet, if that makes sense. Lastly, what I want to just cover here is this is I suppose the closest comparison I could find level by level between the PC and Nintendo 64 version. Again, what you will notice here is the lighting. It's much more prominent in the Nintendo 64 version. However, the overall architecture and structure in the PC version is bigger and it's more complex. There is also some kind of additional texture work that seems to be going on here with the Nintendo 64 version, which I also like. And there is some variances here. For argument's sake, now you can see there's like 2 satellite dishes instead of 1. So they've made their own little subtle tweaks to this to differentiate it somewhat from the PC version. But yeah, look guys, that's it really from me today. I wanted to take a deep dive and try and do my best at making another comparison video. These ones are quite difficult. I ended up losing 6 hours on my original edit, but I did manage to recover in the end. If you like what you see here guys, please make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss the next video. And thanks again for watching. Have a good Paddy's Day.